The UK and US have tonight announced what their leaders call the Atlantic Declaration, a new partnership in response to the growing influence of China. The agreement promises closer collaboration on trade, technology and defence and will, the Prime Minister says, set a new standard for economic cooperation between the allies. It concludes Mr Sunak's two-day visit to Washington, during which President Biden said the US has no closer ally than the UK. That seemed to be borne out in both men's personal ties too. They joked about this being their fourth meeting in as many months. But whatever their warm words, there was no escaping that this failed to amount to the full-scale free trade deal pledged under the Conservatives' last manifesto in 2019. Hopes of striking such a deal had been abandoned, we were told, in response to the global challenges we face right now.
Rishi Sunak's first visit to the White House began with an accidental promotion.
Well, Mr. President, I just demoted you, Mr. Prime Minister.
He seemed to have a comfortable night.
Thank you for welcoming me to the White House and for allowing me to stay in Blair House, which I've got to say, the spare room in the flat in number 10 Downing Street doesn't quite compare. So it's been a real privilege.
So what shape is the special relationship in?
Real good shape.
The two leaders met for 40 minutes alone and 40 minutes with their teams to discuss the economic cooperation needed to defend themselves from the twin threats of Russia and China.
Today we have agreed the Atlantic Declaration, a new economic partnership for a new age, of a kind that has never been agreed before.
The new agreement, called the Atlantic Declaration, includes helping British defence companies attract US investment, making it easier for electric car makers in the UK to sell to the US, a new data sharing scheme and collaboration on artificial intelligence. But really, the Atlantic Declaration is a series of smaller economic agreements. Where is the full trade deal promised by the Conservatives in their 2019 manifesto?
Be in no doubt, as Joe and I were discussing earlier, the economic relationship between our two countries has never been stronger. The trade is worth hundreds of billions of pounds or dollars a year. Over 1 million of our citizens in each other's countries work in each other's companies.
Then President Biden turned to the question of AI.
I don't think ever in the history of human endeavor has there been as fundamental potential technological change as is presented by artificial intelligence. It is staggering. It is staggering. I know it sounds like science fiction, but it is close to science fiction, some of the things.
There are few bigger moments for a British Prime Minister than to stand here in the East Room next to the President of the United States. Rishi Sunak has just achieved that. But does the UK have the same influence here in the White House that it had in the past?
Rishi Sunak wanted to use this visit to lift Britain's status on artificial intelligence and technology. But some say talks between the US and EU are already more advanced. So did Brexit harm Britain's hopes of becoming a world leader on this issue?
The United Kingdom is going to have to prove it can be nimble, it can be innovative, and if it does so, and this is what the Prime Minister is aiming to do, it can continue to be a global leader in innovation, particularly in AI.
Being nimble is what Rishi Sunak wants Britain to be as he seeks to redefine its relationship with the US. He believes that taking a step closer to our allies will help protect us against fierce competition from countries like Russia and China.
And Anushka is tonight just getting ready to travel with the Prime Minister back to the UK, and she's on the tarmac with us right now. Just your assessment of what you've witnessed there, Anushka, and particularly how significant this agreement is.
You know, it's been a whirlwind 48 hours from the baseball to Capitol Hill to the White House. When we got on that plane to come out here, I actually asked Rishi Sunak what happened to that free trade deal that was promised in your 2019 manifesto. And he said the world had changed a lot since 2019. We've had COVID, we've had Ukraine, and that now what he was seeking was a different type of economic partnership. Now, we saw what that looked like today with the Atlantic Declaration, not that big, all-singing trade deal that was promised, but as I said in the piece, a series of economic agreements. And the significance of it is what's happening here in the US. There's been a move towards protectionism here, a sense that perhaps free trade hasn't been quite as good for American companies as people hoped. There have been subsidies that have worried Britain. This deal allows us to chip into that protectionism, to allow some of our companies to benefit from US investment in a way that they couldn't. But as I said, it is relatively small, although symbolically it's a shift for us towards protectionism, a move towards our allies to protect ourselves from Russia and China.
OK, safe travels back. Anushka, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, Mr Biden and Mr Sunak, of course, both keen to stress the potential benefits for businesses on both sides of the Atlantic. Joel, our economics editor's here to assess that. And it's interesting that line that Anushka used there, chipping away at protectionism. What do you make of what we've seen today? And indeed, what are you hearing from the wider business community about
Well,
it?
I think there are still concerns about the impact that the President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act can have on British companies. The wall of subsidies is so large. But look, this is not a free trade deal. The Atlantic Declaration is, as Anushka rightly said, a package of agreements. Yes, designed for closer economic ties, also clearly designed to cut China out of vital supply chains around artificial intelligence, 5G, 6G, technology more generally. So yes, it's protectionist in that sense. There are, though, some things there which should help trade. British defence companies, access to US research funding, that's quite a biggie. British nuclear companies will be able to export more in theory. British engineers and accountants should be able to work more easily in the US. And there's a critical minerals deal, which means electric car makers in the UK will, in theory, be able to tap into those subsidies we were talking about just to develop car batteries. Tonight, Alan Winters, University of Sussex, could be good for trade, but needs implementing properly. John Springford from the Centre of European Reform says it doesn't have the economic heft of a free trade deal, won't undo the damage that Brexit's caused in the short term, but does have value.
There are lots of things which are going to be useful for particular types of company in the UK, some in the tech sector, some in the defence industry. You know, there are some really helpful things there, but this isn't something which is going to make a big difference to the average person on the street. It's not going to raise their income really in a way that they would notice.
One last thing to say, lots of bonhomie in the White House, but there's big economic differences between the two men, actually. President Biden believes in the power of subsidies. Rishi Sunak is a free marketeer, all the way through his blood. President Biden thinks Brexit was an act of self-harm. Rishi Sunak believes that long-term, our future's bright.
OK, Joel, thank you for that analysis. Thank you.